Steve is a character that mainly utilizes counter hit tools, insane poking pressure, and command grabs whilst in hit to get the job done. In this guide, I'm gonna give you guys Steve's most important tools that you must always implement in your gameplay, whilst also giving you some good tips and tricks revolving around those particular tools. This includes both offense and defense oriented tips and tricks that you should fully utilize around Steve's arsenal that will make you a force to be reckoned with if implemented correctly in your game plan. So sit back, relax, boot up your game, and let's get that Steve ready for his next boxing match.
Don't miss me winning.
So Steve, being a boxer, has arguably the strongest jab game in the game by far. His jabs are so versatile that they can be used both offensively and defensively, and you must always implement his jabs in your game plan. Now, there are many good reasons as to why Steve's jabs are so strong in this game. So first, let's talk about his one jab. His one jab might not be the best in the game, but this is complemented by the rest of the jabs that follow up. So it's a 1-2 jab, 1-2-3, up to 1-2-3-4 jab as well. So now Steve's one jab on its own lacks range in this game, but like I said, it's complemented by the rest of the jabs. So the whole thing gels, meaning if the first hit lands, the rest of the string locks the opponent up. The whole string is safe if you remember to cancel the last hit by pressing forward 3 into down back, and the third hit is natural on counter hit as well, so it's a very good string to just throw out. So one of the reasons that makes this string so good is the fact that it can be difficult to punish as well if or when ducked. So for example, I can duck up to the third hit and try to outstanding punish it, but depending on the timing or how late the opponent removes the punish, it can get interrupted by the third or fourth hit. So you can throw this out with very little risk most of the times. Another good thing about the string is the third hit has generally good tracking, so you can use this string kind of like a homing move. Honestly, you will not find yourself getting stepped by throwing out this move, so you can use it as a homing move to some extent. Okay, but like, why exactly would you want to throw out this string? So I'm gonna give you guys 3 important scenarios in which this string is very important to Steve Fox. Firstly, we'll talk about the defensive utility of this string. So earlier I spoke about the one jab and how Steve's one jab is not that great. So generally in this game, the one jab is a good way to like check your opponent and just like stop them from pressuring you all the time. It's a very good safe check, but most characters in this game only throw out the one jab because they don't really have a good jab string, and that's where this string comes into play. That's where Steve's 1-2-3-4 is so damn good. So this string is an insane keep out move, guys. This string is the killer of pressure because it comes out at 10 frames. It's basically a 10 frame get off me move or stay away from me move. That makes it very difficult for most of the characters in this game to deal with. So I'll give you guys a few scenarios. For example, Hwoarang. When you think of Hwoarang in neutral, Hwoarangs love down forward tools and they love forward as well, the peacekeeper, right? So the 1-2-3-4 jab string in general is a very good interruption tool or a good keep away from me too. This also applies to characters like Brian, for example, that love 3+4, Godike back 1, forward 2. At that particular range, Steve's jab just controls the space, controls the pressure, and just stops characters from spamming buttons in the middle, like at that range. So that's really what you want to do with Steve's jabs defensively. And this is especially important against characters that don't have good high crush moves. Hwoarang, for example, Brian, even the Mishimas. The 1-2-3-4 jabs can even challenge Electrics, guys. They're just that great. They interrupt Electric so well, but at times it will go under, so the Electric will go under his second jab, so be very careful. It's kind of like a 50-50 scenario with Mishimas, but in general, Steve is basically the only character in the game that can challenge Electrics. He is, like, the string is just that good. So defensively, it's a very good way to stop pressure and just keep opponents off of you and interrupt their offense at this particular range, like range 1 to range 2. Now, whilst this string is good at controlling space and interrupting pressure as well, remember I did say it's very strong against opponents that have very little high crush moves. It can be the death of you against characters that have high crush moves, like really good high crush moves, like low sweeps, for example. Just to give you guys some examples, Lars down back 4, Victor down back 4, Feng down back 3, Jin down 2. These moves completely destroy Steve of players that spam jabs too much. I will touch on this as well when we talk about back one, which is another of his good moves that we'll talk about later in the video. But overall, for his jabs, be very mindful of the characters you play. You want to minimize your jab usage against characters with very strong high crash moves, so mix up the jabs with like some decent mids like quarter circle forward 1, down forward 1, down forward 2, which I'll also touch on later in the video. So to recap, defensively, use it for keep out, use it to interrupt pressure, use it to control space. 1 up to 1, 2, 3, 4 jabs. You can mix up the string as well, just do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 as well. Very strong at that mid to close range. And secondly, you can use Steve's jabs offensively as well. Steve's jabs are very good for getting in. Remember, you can cancel the third hit into his flicker stance by holding back, or his peekaboo stance by holding forward, right? So you can actually cancel the 1, 2, 3 into stance, then continue your pressure as well. One of the biggest critiques I get about Steve is the fact that he doesn't really have good ways to get in. Boy, oh boy, are these comments wrong. Steve has actually some of the most ridiculous ways to get in against the opponent, with 1, 2, 3 into peekaboo or flicker being the most basic way. Like, people tend to respect the whole string or wait for the fourth string, the fourth hit. So mixing it up by cancelling the third hit can be a very good way to mix up your opponent and just get into their face and continue your pressure. So offensively, you want to cancel your jab string as well, making it very difficult to deal with in general. And lastly, Steve's jab string is very strong with the opponent's back against the wall. He does have this mix up of, is he gonna do the last hit or is he gonna cancel and go for some more pressure from there. So it does have that mental frame, or that mental mix up, which makes it very annoying. So you can do like 1, 2, 3, then cancel into like stomp, right? You can do like 1, 2, 3, cancel into rocket launcher, or you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, down 4, I think. He has a low sweep from the string as well, which I forgot to mention. So at the wall, it can be very difficult to deal with because one false move and the opponent gets wall splats for some big damage. So that's what makes it very good at the wall as well. So recap, defensively, very strong for keep out and space pressure, right? Keep the opponent off of you, especially against opponents that have very bad high crash moves. Offensively, it's good way of getting in due to the fact that you can cancel the third hit into either peekaboo or flicker stance that allows you to continue your pressure. So offensively, and lastly at the wall, due to its versatility, the way you can cancel it, the way you can fake it and just do the last hit or do the low, it makes it a very scary move to deal with at the wall as well. So use your jabs, guys. Steve has the best jabs in the game. Jab strings in general, very strong. Do not sleep on these. Okay, so guys, just for reference and as a good example, we have Newman CH Steve here, who is one of Pakistan's strongest Steves in a Tekken tournament, and I'm gonna give you guys the example of how he uses the 1, 2, 3, 4 jab. So yeah, he gets hit by Azosina's running 3-4. Running 3-2, sorry. He gets up from the ground. As you can see, he has a life lead. He's 1 hit away from taking the tournament. So he gets up from the ground, uses 1 jab, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, keep out. As you can see, defensively using the string as a way to keep the opponent away from him. Alright guys, for just another reference, we have LionHeart, who is a Korean Steve player in another tournament here, going up against Chanel. So just for another scenario, so he's gone for a throw here. As you can see, boom. Okay. Then here, Chanel tries to start pressure with 1 jab, then LionHeart immediately interrupts her with the jab. As you can see, it's very good at interrupting pressure and just telling the person to just get off me, you know. And now for his second most important tool, let's speak about Steve's down forward 1. Now, a simple down forward 1 in this game should be self-explanatory and easy to understand. It's simply a check in the game on to see what your opponent will do afterwards. Now, there's a reason as to why Steve's down forward 1 makes this list as well. Firstly, Steve does not have that many strong mids, and down forward 1 definitely makes that cut. Secondly, there are so many cancels of Steve's down forward 1, including a counter hit launcher as well. And for that matter, Steve's down forward 1 has to make this list as one of his most important mids for sure. Okay, so first for his down forward 1, nothing too complicated here. It's simply just a check or a read to see what your opponent tends to do after you land this, so nothing too complicated on this one. He has a down forward 1-2, which is used as a mix-up for that down forward 1. So basically, if your opponent is mashing buttons a lot after down forward 1, you use that down forward 1-2 as a mix-up to kind of interrupt them. So it's a mid-high though, so it can be dark, so be very careful. Now Steve has so many cancels from this that it's crazy. It expands the mix-up games, the mind games, the counter hit baits. It's insane. His down forward 1 gimmicks are just they're just crazy, bro. So firstly, he has down forward 1-1, which is a down forward 1-2 cancel. So he basically does down forward 1-2, but cancels the second hit and does 1. So it becomes a high and it takes him into flicker if you hold back, so it's safe and becomes a counter hit launcher as well. So this really messes up your opponent's timing. Let's say they want to duck the down forward 1-2, but if you cancel that 2 and do the down forward 1-1, you instead counter hit their while standing punish instead of them actually launching you for doing that down forward 1-2 instead. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit complicated but easy to grasp, right? So yeah, this is a very strong tool that you must implement in your down forward 1 gameplay. And the mix up to this down forward 1-1 cancel is his down forward 1-2. So basically down forward 1-1 is a high, right? High cancel into another high, so it can be ducked if your opponent makes the right read. However, you can cancel it for the down forward 1-2 instead, which is a mid. However, it is unsafe on block at -10, which means it is jab punishable. So as you can see, the mind games off of a single down forward 1 that Steve has are out of this world. It's ridiculous as how much stuff he can do off of this down forward 1. Surprise, surprise, it doesn't actually end there. You can actually cancel his down forward 1-2 into either his sways or his duck, right? So down forward 1-2 forward 3 or down forward 1-2 4 or 3 for the sways. So like I said, the mind games, the mix-up games are insane on this down forward 1. There is so much you can do. I don't think this guide will even actually cover everything. The creativity is mostly up to the player, but I'll give you guys some basics or the idea behind these cancels and watch each of them serve, because they do serve different purposes. So first, let's start with the down forward. So down forward is basically like a generic poke. Like I said, you check the opponent and see what they tend to do afterwards. It can be used offensively or defensively. You can offense like, down forward 1 into back 1 on hit. That is a frame trap. They press buttons, they will get hit. You can do down forward 1 into jabs to initiate pressure. That's actually a very good strat for Steve because his jab game, like I said, is very strong. Down forward 1-2 if they press buttons, but the 2 is a high, so it can be ducked like I said earlier. So there's this like mix up that you can do, right? So if they press buttons, down forward 1-2, but most of the times you won't find yourself getting punished for doing down forward 1-2. Not the same as characters like Leroy, for example. This is due to the fact that Steve has so many cancels to his down forward 1, like I said earlier. Then you can introduce the down forward 1-1, which is the best option that Steve has from this due to the fact that it is a counter hit launcher. So you're basically baiting their while standing punish if they press buttons off of your down forward 1, thinking you will do a down forward 1-2 instead. So they want to duck the mid high, but instead you cancel the high to a slower delayed version of that high. So down forward 1-2, cancel the 2, then do the 1 again for that back 1 counter hit. And remember, hold back to go into flicker and make it safe. If they block this move, right, the down forward 1-2, it's basically neutral. This move is 0 on block, meaning you both reset the neutral, you can still move afterwards, and Steve is in flicker and he has a power crash from this. He has 10 frame jab, so you can still keep your pressure going. We'll talk about flicker later on in the video, but you can still keep your pressure going, which makes down forward 1-1 an insane tool to use off of his down forward 1. You can use the cancel like down forward 1-2 into forward 3 to go to duck if you want to continue your pressure in peekaboo stance, for example, or go for like an instant or standing, because like I said, if they don't press buttons, they respect you. This opens up the Pandora box of mix-ups, right? You can go for like down forward 1-2, boom, cancel into duck, into full crouch, down forward 1 to go into peekaboo and continue your peekaboo pressure as well. We will talk about peekaboo stance in the video, stay tuned. You can sway if you want, just go into, sway 1-2, for example, that takes you into LionHeart stance, which on hit, you can continue your pressure from there as well. well. So like down forward 1 opens up so many possibilities, but it mostly depends on the reads that you have against your opponent. It can put you at a disadvantage if you're just doing random stuff, so you have to make reads. Remember what I said, guys, down forward 1 is a generic check for every character in this game. It's basically how you read your opponent. Down forward 1, see how they react. Down forward 1, okay? Are they not pressing buttons? Down forward 1, 2. Are they mashing a lot? Down forward 1 to cancel into down forward 1 to 1, boom, counter it back 1. So that's the idea behind Steve's down forward 1. Now, like I said, there's so much revolving around this down forward 1 that I can't cover everything, but I hope this actually makes sense and you get to implement this in your game plan. One of Steve's strongest mids for sure. Okay, so now let's talk about Steve's back 1, which is his most iconic move and arguably the best counter hit launcher in the game by far. There is no character in the game that has a 13 frame counter hit launcher that's only -1 on block. That is ridiculous, and this is why Steve's back 1 is very, very infamous. So the reason it's -1 is because you have to go into flicker after doing it. So if you don't stay in flicker, it's actually unsafe. So you must always go into flicker stance and cancel it with down back to stay safe. Now, if you're not very familiar with frame data, or you happen to be a beginner or intermediate level, now what I mean by -1 is basically you can throw out this move and still be able to continue your offense afterwards. Not many counter hit tools give you that luxury in this game. King's down forward 2-1, for example, is a mix-up between the high and just him doing the mid. You have to actually counter hit confirm to get that launcher. Steve can just throw this out and still pressure you afterwards, which makes it the best counter hit feature in the game by far. It's just that good, it's insane. So just how exactly do you use back 1 and how do you implement it in your gameplay? Well, first of all, I would like to compare back 1 in a similar sense with his jab game. You use it in a similar sense because just like the jabs, Steve's back 1 is one of the best get off me moves as well, it being a counter hit feature of course. So you can use it defensively and offensively as well. Offensively in a sense that you can go into flicker stance like I explained earlier, which makes it a very good tool for just continuous pressure as well. So let's talk defensively. Now basically you want to use this move as just stop pressing buttons, right? Shut up, boom, back 1. Steve forces the opponent to stop being aggressive against him. You can't be aggressive against a Steve player. You have to play at his pace, mainly because of this goddamn move. Back 1 is just that good. You have to respect this move unless it's against characters that have really, really good crushing property moves or like high crash moves. I will explain with the jabs. That actually applies to Steve's back 1 as well. So characters like Victor sweeps, Lara's sweeps, you know, Feng down back 3, Asuka back 3, Jin down 2. Characters with very, very good high crushing moves can actually challenge back 1, and just like the jabs, doing back 1 or spamming back 1 too much against these characters can actually get you killed. This is the reason why people actually think Steve is bad in some instances, because they're like, oh, people talk about back 1 that much, but it's actually not that good, because I find myself getting counter hit, right? That's because characters with good high crash moves can just challenge the hell out of back 1, and they don't really give a damn about that back 1. So you have to be mindful on how much you use this back 1. So defensively, like I said, use this back 1 to stop the aggressiveness of your opponent, right? Tekken 8 is a very aggressive game and people tend to get carried away, but against Steve you won't really get away with it. Remind them that you have this back 1 to shut their offense right off. It can also be used as a zoning tool. So think of like Victor's gunshot, right? Victor's love spamming the gunshot when they're like full screen. So with Steve, try to spam the back 1 when you're like mid screen somewhere there, right? Just to remind that you actually have that too. Now what this does is you actually think, okay, this guy keeps spamming back 1, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go low and actually go under the back 1 and punish him. That's kind of the idea. You want to bait them to start going low, start doing like small checks and mid checks that maybe go under high crashes, and mix up your back 1 by throwing mids and ducking, right? That's the whole idea behind the defensive back 1. Not just as a defensive tool, but as bait as well. Boom, back 1, boom, back 1, boom, back 1. The opponent expects another back 1, okay? Down forward 2, right? Rocket launcher. Mix that up. That's what makes makes it so strong defensively. There aren't really that many counterplays to back one because the move is just too good, man. On whiff, the recovery is insane. It's not that easy to whiff punish. You can't really sidestep in a sense because the tracking is actually really good. So guys, back one is amazing. Furthermore, you can also use back one for hard reads and like counterplay. So for example, let's take a look at Brian's quarter circle back one, for example, or Jin's forward 2, right? So with these characters, you know they're going to throw out that move, right? You know, like these are trigger happy moves that these characters use. So with Steve's back one, you can actually try to counter that move they do by dashing forward and doing a back one. So let's say Jin comes into forward 2. So what you want to do is you want to dash forward, right? Anticipate that forward 2 and throw out the back one. So you're countering the forward 2 with a back one. Now, secondly, you have to look at the trade-off, right? If you lose to that forward 2, Jin gets a hit engager. Okay, that's not bad, but it's not as bad as getting hit by Steve's back one for a full launch, right? You look at the risk versus reward. So dash up back one against Jin's forward 2 is like a good counterplay against it. But Brian's quarter circle forward 1 or 3+4, right? You can use the same initiative or the same counterplay, but you get at the risk of getting launched yourself because they are also counter hit fishing tools. So you run the risk of getting launched as well. So it's really up to you on making those hard reads. It also depends on reading your opponent. It's not just something you throw out. That's what most of the people don't understand, especially non-Steve players, is back one is not just a move that can be spammed. I mean, it can be, but there is counterplay to using this move, right? If you watch Knee knows how to use back one for counterplay. I think amongst all the Steve players, he has a high success rate at landing back ones because of his counterplay, his timing, his movement, right? That all plays into using Steve's back one defensively. So just to recap on the defensive utility of back one, just like the jabs, you can use it as a get off me move. If the opponent is too aggressive against you, remind them why they're facing Steve. That back one is good to stop the pressure. 2, you can use back one as a bait. If you use back one enough times, people start ducking. They start using tools that go under back one or go under highs in general. You can use that knowledge to actually counterplay off of that and put yourself at a favorable advantage. 3, it's actually a good idea to zone with back one at the mid range, especially against characters that don't have very good high crash properties. This will force them to actually have a different approach at getting in against you. And lastly, use back one as a counterplay mechanic or as an intercepting tool. For example, against a Jin forward 2, you can anticipate they're gonna throw out that move, so try to intercept them and land that counter hit back one. So now let's talk about how you want to use back one offensively. So what I mean by this is you can actually continue your pressure after throwing out back one and going into flicker stance because of how generous the frame data is. Just to put things into perspective, a down forward one is -3 and you can still move afterwards. Back one into flicker stance is -1. So you guys can compare the two differences. You have more frames to actually do something after back one, even more than a down forward one, which makes it a very strong option offensively as well. So like back one into flicker stance already, you can go flicker jabs afterwards, which is his fastest option. His flicker back one jabs actually come out at 10 frames. So if you do back one into flicker back one jabs, your jabs will now come out at 11 frames, right? So already you can see that the pressure game he has after back one into flicker is still ridiculous. So since his flicker jabs come out at 11 frames, they can be interrupted by your opponent's jabs because they will come out at 10 frames because, like I said, back one into flicker puts you at -1, right? So to counter this, you can throw out Steve's power crush, and the power crush option will beat anything other than a one jab or a sidestep or their own power crush as well, or if they duck, right? So it's kind of like a mix-up game. So he's gonna do back one into flicker jabs or back one into power crush, right? So again, it's all about making reads. So let's say they're down forward wanting you every time you do back one into flicker. So the best option after this is either flicker jabs or a power crush. So what I love to do if they're doing like down forward and every time I do back one is flicker back one into albatross 2 or flicker back one 3+4 2, which is a natural natural hit on counter hit. So like back one, then back one, spin two. Very, very strong against characters, against people that like mashing anything slower than a jab. Very, very strong. You can also use power crush, like I said earlier, unless they jab check you. Most pro players like checking you with a one jab and then ducking the power crush, then launching you. You must be aware about this. Although this is high level stuff, I don't think you run into many people that do this. And a lot of people actually tend to duck as well after you do back one. This is because, like I said, Steve's flicker jabs actually come out very fast, right, at 11 frames. So sometimes they try to anticipate you, duck your jabs and launch you, and this is where flicker 2 comes into play. So you can do like back 1 into flicker 2, right? So they duck, they get hit, natural knockdown, 4 guaranteed, down 1+2 follow up. And just like his down forward 1, you can cancel into his sways, you can cancel into his duck forward 3. So you can do like back 1 into duck cancel forward 3 into full crouch down forward 1 to go into Peekaboo, continue your pressure from there. So basically, like I said earlier, it's a Pandora's box of mix-ups. It's up to the creative mindset of you, the Steve player. Okay, and lastly, back 1 being a counter hit feature, of course you want to have some setups in which you bait your opponent in pressing buttons so you can get a guaranteed back 1 counter hit launch. So I'll give you guys just some good frame traps that you can use and you can go on from there. So the basic stuff, 1-1-2 on hit followed by back 1 is a counter hit frame trap. They press buttons after the punish, they get hit. Same for 2-2, which is 12 frame punisher on hit is a frame trap as well, while standing 1-2 on hit into back 1 is a frame trap as well. They press buttons, they get hit. Up back 2 on block is actually +3, which is one of his best back 1 setups on block, right? You trade with whatever they throw out, but you still get a launcher in your favor. Very, very strong. Running 2 on block into back 1 is another frame trap. Very, very strong. While standing 2-2 cancel into back 1 is another frame trap. Forward 2-2 cancel on hit into back 1 is another frame trap. The generic down forward 1 on hit, down forward 1-2 also on hit into back 1 is a frame trap as well. So like I said, he has a lot. These are just some basics and the easy stuff to get you going. But as you play Steve, the longer you play Steve, the more so you find yourselves in these familiar situations where you know that back 1 will hit if they press buttons in these particular situations. Just a few more back 1-2 on hit as well into back 1 is a frame trap. If you cancel back 1-2, you're not going to LionHeart, sway 1-2 just like that. Shoulder sway into 2-1 as well into back 1 is a frame trap as well. So that's basically back 1 in a nutshell, boys, and how you want to fully utilize this. As you can tell, this has been a long section, and honestly I have to make a guide on just back 1 on its own. Like that guide can be so long because there's so much I still want to talk about, but this should cover the overall good fundamentals of back 1 and how you get the most output out of using this move, both offensively, defensively, and for setups as well. Don't sleep on back 1, the best counter hit 2 in the game for sure. Okay, so now let's talk about Steve's down forward 2, which is another of Steve's most important mids. So it's a very good mid check and also a counter hit feature. It gives you outstanding 1-2 on counter hit, or the massage or his machine gun punches on counter hit as well. So just like his back 1, the move on its own is unsafe. So down forward 2 without any sort of cancel is actually very punishable, so you always want to cancel this move. So you cancel it by going into his duck, so down forward 3 into forward 3, then cancel the duck by pressing down back and then blocking. That's how you make this down forward 2 safe. And for this fact, you find yourself actually using counter hit down forward 2 into outstanding 1-2 rather than his down forward 2 into the massage punches, because you have to stay into his duck without cancelling, which is pretty unsafe. So you have to visually see if the move lands on counter hit, then decide whether you want to cancel, then go into outstanding 1-2, which is the easier option, or stay in his ducking mode and do his machine gun punches. Earlier we discussed how godlike Steve's jabs and his back 1 are, but despite being that godlike, they are highs, and so you need some mids to mix that up, and this is where down forward 2 comes into play, just like down forward 1. So firstly, you can use it as a mid check. Of course, that's the most basic way to use it, just a mid check. Are they ducking too much? Boom, down forward 2. But you can also use it as a feature, being a counter hit as well, and a way to initiate your pressure. So let's talk about it, starting with how it works as a feature. So on block, you always want to back away from this move. Just cancel and stay safe, because despite the move saying -2, because you have a cancel from this and you come from crouch, it's basically a -9 counter hit launcher. So let's say you do down forward 2, then you cancel. If the opponent does a down forward 1, they will beat every single option that you throw out after this down forward 2 on block, right? So you always want to just back away if you do down forward 2 on block. And just to put things into perspective as well, it leaves you point blank range in your opponent's face. Yeah, point blank range. So if you're fighting against a paw, you put yourself in the demolition man range. So you're eating a mix up if you do this down forward 2 on block, right? Against Steve, he can stomp against you as well. So on block, the best thing you want to do is just back out. Down forward 2, cancel, back out, stay safe. Now, in some cases, depending on the reads on your opponent, you can do down forward 2 into duck forward 2 to catch them slacking. Sometimes they throw things out late because of how fast this move comes out. Now, this is just in some instances, guys, because the down forward 2 can launch you for doing this on block. Down forward 2 on block is basically -9. So think of it like a Jin forward 2 that leaves you at point blank range. The best thing you want to do on block is just cancel and stay safe, unless you have a read on your opponent. If they're pressing buttons really late, then you can throw out like a cancel standing 1 or like a duck forward 2 and try to land that counter hit. It's really good. But where down forward 2 shines mostly is on hit. This move is like plus forever on hit, bro. Like, it's so good. And this is why I said you have to visually see if this down forward 2 lands on block or on hit, because if it's on hit, that's when you can initiate pressure. You can keep going, because remember, you are in his darkened state, right? So you can do some wild things. So for example, you do like a down forward 2 into duck 1, right? Down forward 2 on hit into duck 1 is a frame trap. They press any buttons, they get hit. Down forward 2 on hit into duck forward 2 is a frame trap as well. Down forward 2 into cancel standing 1 into cancel standing 2. All these are frame traps and the opponent must respect. But like I said earlier, it all depends on whether that down forward 2 lands on hit. So this will take some practice. I suggest going into practice mode. If you have the game booted up right now, put the CPU on random block and do down forward 2. If the CPU blocks, just cancel and back away, stay safe. If the CPU gets hit, that's when you can initiate your pressure. Now, you can even cancel his duck by holding down back, then going into Peekaboo with like a full crouch down forward 1 to get your pressure going, right? This is what makes down forward 2 so good. So good. So it's not just a check, right? You can also initiate pressure if the move lands on hit, which is very dude, it's like, it's so good with Steve, man. Very good. Now, down forward 2 is not as good as it was back in Tekken 7. Of course, it used to give us a full combo back in Tekken 7 despite being hard, so rip down forward 2, but it's still a very good mid check. You can't rely on back 1 and jabs as Steve. You have to throw out some mids as well, right? And the timing, messing up your timing with down forward 2 is really good as well. So I spoke about frame traps earlier with back 1, so stuff like 1-1-2 into back 1 or standing 1-2 into back 1 as well. Sometimes you want to just mess up the timing and throw out a down forward 2 instead, because like I said, back 1 is a high. Despite being good, it's a high. So you can do like 1-1-2 into down forward 2 instead, right? Or standing 1-2 into down forward 2 instead, just to mix up the timing. In the words of MYK, who is a very strong Steve player from America, he did say back in Tekken 7 that if down forward 2 doesn't work, back 1 will work, and vice versa, right? So mix up your timings with back 1 and down forward 2. It's also not as good as it was back in Tekken 7 in terms of tracking. It's very linear in this game, so be very careful, especially at the highest level. It's very difficult to use this and not get stepped, right? But I will admit it's very difficult to punish most of the times. Steve tends to realign himself with the opponent, and you won't really find yourself getting launched that much unless it's a very hard read, unless the opponent is really expecting it. But overall, you will get maybe like a jab punish or like a down forward 1 check. It's not that risky of a move to throw out, and that's Steve's biggest strength. Like I said in the intro, Steve's risk is not that high. He's a very low risk, high reward character. And lastly, of course, down forward 2 being a counter hit move as well, it's really good to have some frame traps. And just like back one. It does have a couple of good things you can do. 2-2 as well is, I think it's +6, right? So down forward 2, 2-2 into down forward 2 is a good frame trap. You have running 2 into down forward 2, a good frame trap. But like I said, mostly it works as a mix up with back one, just to mess up the timing for that back one. It's all about timing. Your opponent won't be randomly ducking all the time because now they know they have a down forward 2 mid to deal with as well. Steve's quarter circle forward 1, better known as his rocket launcher, is another of his power mids outside of Albatross 2 and running 2. This is without a doubt Steve's best power mid. It is so good. It is so good. And just like down forward 2 and down forward 1, it should be used in tandem as a good mid check for his jabs and his back one. I'll keep repeating myself on how important it is to use your mids with Steve, because back one is so feared, people duck it so much. His jabs are so feared, people duck them so much. So these mids will keep your opponent in check and stop them from ducking. So it's a very good mid. Save the hit engager that knocks down pretty good, if I do say so myself. Now we won't spend a huge amount of time on this rocket launcher because it's very basic to use and as easy as it comes. So just think of Jin's forward 2. You basically use the rocket launcher in the same sense. It's a very good mid check. The only difference is rocket launcher takes you in a stance, takes you into flicker stance, just like his back one. And just like his back one, you have to make it safe by going into flicker, then cancelling with down back. And just like back one, the principles still apply to quarter circle forward 1 as well, in a sense that offensively you can still keep your pressure going with flicker because it's only -3 on block if you go into flicker. So just like we discussed with the back one section, you can go like back one to power crash, back one to flicker jabs. That applies to rocket launcher as well. So quarter circle forward 1, go into flicker, use the power crash, it will beat the down forward 1, it will beat jabs. You can still sway after this, you can duck, cancel. It is very versatile. But my main point of rocket launcher is use it in tandem with back one as a mix up for that mid check, that big mid check that takes you into hit. Rocket launcher is that move for you. On whiff also, it's not really that risky. Just like back one, the whiff recovery is pretty good. Your opponent won't whiff punish it that many times unless they are expecting it, right? Unless they expect it. But overall, like I said with Steve, very little risk. You should not find yourself being punished that much for throwing out this move. The tracking is also pretty good as compared to down forward 2. Very good tracking, especially to his right side. So if you find yourself getting stepped that much from using down forward 2, throw out some rocket launchers and you should be good. But overall, a power mid check that you use in tandem with back one as a mix up. Very strong mid. Steve's up back 2 is another of his really amazing tools. It's a high homing move that's +3 on block. It also guarantees you a Sonic Fang on hit or a LionHeart 1 if you decide to go into LionHeart after the up back 2. Now, among all the tools that we've talked about so far, up back 2 is the one tool that you can get away with without actually using it in your arsenal or implementing it in your gameplay. This is because despite being a homing move, Steve's tracking in this game is actually pretty good. He has tools like back one, his jabs, his lows also have pretty good tracking, so you can get away without actually using this move. But the move is just too good to pass upon. It's a safe homing high that's plus on block and gives you something guaranteed on normal hit. There is no way you can just pass up on a move this good. So many characters would kill to have Steve's up back 2 in their arsenal, and we're gonna talk about it. So like I said, up back 2 is +3 on block. So the first thing that comes to mind is it's a very good setup for Steve's back one, a very good frame trap. Remember, Steve's back one comes out at 13 frames, so it's a frame trap. They press any buttons after up back 2 on block, you get a trade in your favor. So this is what opens up the mind games of up back 2. So just don't think about it as a homing move, think about it as a frame trap for back one. So what happens is, if the opponent finally realizes that this is a very good setup for back one, they start ducking, and this is where the mind games come into play. If they start ducking, you can now stay in LionHeart and go for LionHeart 1 or LionHeart 2, which is a natural launcher on hit. This is what makes Up Back 2 so good. The mind games. It's not really even a mix-up, it's just a mind game, right? Up Back 2, frame trap into back 1. Okay, they know that's coming, they're gonna duck. They start ducking, you stay in LionHeart to go for LionHeart 1 or LionHeart 2 to launch their ass. When they know this is another possibility, they'll stop ducking, right? If they stop ducking, they'll stop pressing buttons because they're scared of that back 1. They stop pressing buttons, you can now go for the LionHeart guard break, right? Because they're not pressing buttons. They are afraid to press buttons because of that back 1, right? So, like, it's insane. Just the mind games of a single move can just change a match, bro. Like, it gives you so much respect, it's ridiculous. But I will admit, this is something that the opponent has to learn, right? They have to learn that Up Back 2 is a frame trap, but most of the times, they will try to interrupt after Up Back 2 and they'll get hit a few times. When they realize it is when you start going for the mix-ups, right? Staying in LionHeart, going for LionHeart 1, going for LionHeart 2. This is what makes Up Back 2 so strong, so strong. Now, I will admit that this move is pretty awkward to use, right? The Up Back 2 input just feels very janky. I don't know why they chose Up Back 2 of all inputs, right? Up Back 2 just feels very wrong, right? You won't find a lot of stiff players using this move, and if they do, it's not something they use to a massive extent. Like I said, back 1 also has some very good tracking, and it feels as though back 1 does its job already, so you don't really need Up Back 2, right? The only difference being Up Back 2 being a dedicated homing move that actually gives something on natural hit, guaranteed Sonic Fang or guaranteed LionHeart 1. So again, you can afford to not use this move. You don't really have to, but it's a very strong tool that you should implement in your arsenal, especially if your opponent is sidestepping a lot, right? So I spoke about down forward 2 earlier, how you want to also mix that up with your back 1 and your jabs. For example, after outstanding 1-2, you can go for like a down forward 2. You can do that with Up Back 2 as well, just to like mess up their timing, right? 1-1-2 punish, Up Back 2, 2-2 punish, Up Back 2, outstanding 2-2, Up Back 2, outstanding 1-2, Up Back 2, just to mix up the timing and to check if they're really sidestepping that much. But overall, you can afford to not use this tool, but man, it is too good. I suggest you try to throw it out at least once or twice in a full set. It's just that good. Now let's get into the lows. Steve is notoriously known for having horrible lows, and that carries on in Tekken 8 as well. But at the end of the day, you need lows in this game to open up your opponent. You need lows to win, and Steve does have some decent lows, but at the best, he has lows that are regarded as pokes and not like big lows like Dragunov, for example. Now this makes sense considering he's a very compact playstyle that relies heavily on poking and counter hit fishing, and he's a very safe character, and as such, his lows aren't really that risky, at least the decent ones that are regarded as pokes. So let's start with down 1. Down 1 is his go-to poke. It's basically a worse version of Dragunov's down 2. It's -2 on hit, and just to put things into perspective, Dragunov's down 2 is -1. So -2, you basically lose your turn in a sense because you crouch and your opponent stays standing. So you don't really have very good follow-ups after this, but you still can make it work in a sense. Okay, so when you got down 1 into outstanding 1, you will trade with their down forward 1, but you will lose to the jab. So it's kind of like a mix-up, right? Down 1, outstanding 1, if they jab, you lose. The down forward 1, you trade with them. So you can counter this by actually swaying with his right sway or his left sway. So down 1 into sway right or sway left, we will beat that down forward 1. It also will beat the jabs because the sway actually has some built-in high crush. You can also go low, so like down 1 into full crouch, down forward 1 into Peekaboo. This is a direct counter to the jabs, right? Because remember, the jabs will beat the outstanding 1 after Steve's down 1. So it's not really something you can really use very aggressively because it's a mix-up situation. Sometimes you will find yourself getting launched if you like down 1 into sway and your opponent knows your habits. A simple down forward 1 is enough to stop almost all of Steve's pressure because even the sway gets tracked sometimes, so you have to do like a deep sway. By the time you do a deep sway, they'll have already recovered from that down forward 1. So you won't even actually catch them with the down forward 1, whiffing the down forward 1, you know. So it's not that good of a low, it's more so of a check. It's -13 on block, which is ridiculous considering it only does like what, 11 damage on hit, right? The tracking is decent, not that good, but it's decent. It's just a go-to check. It's just a low poke, you know, just check your opponent, nothing too serious. But again, like I said guys, you need to use your lows, and this is Steve's go-to low outside of down 2, which we'll talk about next. Speaking of down 2, this can be regarded as Steve's best low and one of the best lows in the game for some multiple reasons. Now I can say the best low, but more so I'll say the best low poke, because it's good but it's not like, you know, an end to be all low, right? So one thing that makes this low so good is the fact that it's practically safe. So down to 1 is a low mid, right? If they block the low, they have to block the mid. They can't punish the low unless they low parry. That's what makes it so good. It's a very good round ender as well. It's just a very good poke. It feels good to do. It's just an overall very good low poke. It gives 21 damage on counter hit. It's only I think 13 for the first hit alone, so like I said, fits into the archetype of Steve being a poke heavy character. And the other thing is the last hit of the string is a counter hit launcher. So down to 1-2, last hit being a high, it can be dark, which opens up a box of mix-ups as well. So the thing about down 2 is you kind of use it like down forward 2, right? If the move lands on counter hit, you get to continue your pressure. If the move is blocked, you just cancel and back away. So you make it safe the same way you make down forward 2 safe. So down to 1, cancel into duck. So down to 1, forward 3, then cancel the duck by holding down back, then block. It's basically a safe low, like I said earlier. This low is just so good. It's so good. So again, like I said, depending on whether the low hits on counter hit, like the first 2 hits land, right, down to 1. If it lands on counter hit, you get to continue your pressure. If it's blocked, think of it as a -9 low poke. Just back away and block, because at -9, if you press buttons, you find yourself getting launched, you find yourself getting counter hit and all that jazz. And this low being a mix up with the last hit being a high, people tend to like dick jab or down jab you instead of ducking, right? Because like as a Steve player, you can cancel and not decide to go for the high and just, you know, buffer the low parry to counter their dick jab or their low poke. This takes some practice, very execution heavy, and it heavily depends on your reads, right? You have to read your opponent and see their habits after you do down to 1. But like generally speaking, down jab or down fours are like the best option people have to counter this low poke, because like I said, the last hit is a high, right? So down jab can counter the high, down force can counter the high as well, and you have to cancel this low, so you can't really continue your offense after down to 1. So the down jab or the down four is a very good option, and hence you have to learn how to buffer low parry after down to 1. But overall, like I said guys, it's a very good generic low poke. You get in, do it. If it's blocked, just back out. You know, if you learn to counter it, you can get to continue pressure by going to like full crouch down forward 1 into Peekaboo, you know, inside or standing 1, just exactly like down forward 2. So if you're using timestamps, please go back to the down forward 2 section. Everything I said about down forward 2 in terms of offense and continuing your pressure applies to down to 1 as well. Now let's talk about Steve's down back 3-2, which is his best low in terms of frame data, damage, and mix-up potential. However, the range is quite bad for this low, and you should exclusively use it either at the wall or after a hit engager, or if you kind of find yourself close to your opponent somehow or in your opponent's face, right? The low is unreactable, it's super fast, it's a low high, it's launch punishable if blocked, right? And it takes you into LionHeart if you don't decide to cancel. So you get a guaranteed mix-up when you go into LionHeart after this stomp. Classic Steve down back 3-2, man, you love to see it. This low is ridiculous at the wall, especially now that you can actually cancel it and not go into LionHeart, meaning at the wall you can just spam it, right? Down back 3-2, into down back 3-2, into down back 3-2, into down back 3-2. Like, it's just that ridiculous. If they duck, mix that up with a quarter circle forward 1 rocket launcher for the wall splat at the wall. Now, of course, it's only -4 if you don't decide to go into LionHeart stance, so only +4 rather. So you basically lose your turn, or you don't get a guaranteed mix-up after this, right? So keep that in mind. Down back 3-2 into rocket launcher, when you cancel and not go to LionHeart, is not a frame trap, right? So people can mash out of it. But the mix-up here is if the Steve player decides to go into LionHeart, you can get LionHeart 1 guaranteed for a hit engager, or a hit dash. If you're already in hit, you can get a hit dash into a full combo. If they stay guarding, you can go for the guard break. If they duck, you can go for the mid, which launches as well. So yeah, it's a very strong low, guys. Very strong low, at the risk of being launched yourself, because again, it is launch punishable. So I won't really spend much time on down back 3-2. It's as easy as it comes, right? At the wall, use it as an Oki setup, do your combo, boom, they wake up into the stomp, go for the mid, go for the high for the guard break, or if you want cancel, don't go to LionHeart, force them to guess again, you can go low again, go for rocket launcher again, stuff like that. Again, exclusively at the wall and after a hit engager. These are the two best scenarios you want to use this down back to. And other scenarios against moves that put you at +9 in your opponent's face. For example, let's say Alisa does fly 2. Fly 2 is -9 and it leaves her point blank range in your opponent's face, right? So in your face, in those scenarios, you can go for Steve Stomp because they're in your face, right? So stuff like that. But overall, offensively, it's either at the wall or after a hit engager. But keep in mind again, it is launch punishable. Steve's Peekaboo stance allows him to stay aggressive. Like this stance allows Steve to stick in the opponent's face for as long as he wants. A lot of people usually confuse how Steve's stances work. So LionHeart's stance is basically his mix-up stance. It gives you one mix-up to go. It's either you get the mix-up and you don't. Flicker stance allows you for some good jab pressure and a very good counter hit fisher with Flicker 2 and the power crash as well for keep out. But it doesn't really have any mix-ups of this stance. Now Peekaboo is like a jack of all trades. He has good mix-up games from this. He has very good pressure from this. He has good counter hit, frame traps from this, and natural launchers as well, and a grab as well, right? So Peekaboo is like the stance of all stances for Steve. It is just that good. So the best thing about Peekaboo firstly is the low down 1. Peekaboo down 1 gives him +2, right? We've seen a trend with Steve for him having bad lows, right? Frame data not that good and he loses his turn most of the time that he throws a low. But Peekaboo down 1 allows him to continue pressure being +2, which is very, very strong, right? The other thing that makes Peekaboo so good is his Peekaboo 2. So Peekaboo 2 has a built-in parry in it, right? Making it a very, very scary tool to deal with. It will counter jabs, right? As a built-in parry against jabs. So even if Steve is negative in the stance, just to give you guys an example, his Peekaboo jab is only -2, right? So ideally you should lose to your opponent's jabs after you throw this Peekaboo 2, right? After his jab, you throw Peekaboo 2, you should lose to your opponent's jabs. But because Peekaboo 2 has a built-in parry, you will counter your opponent's jabs. And Peekaboo 2 is also a counter hit launcher. I forgot to mention that. So already there's some crazy stuff you can do from this, guys. It's insane. Like the only biggest weakness to this Peekaboo 2 is 10 frame kicks. Characters with 10 frame kicks like Horang's 4-3 for example is really good against Steve in Peekaboo. Low's 3 as well, or is it 4-3? His 11 frame Punisher is really good against Steve in Peekaboo. But ideally Steve is a god against jabs in this stance due to that Peekaboo 2. And that Peekaboo 2 is what most of the people actually look for in Steve's stance. That's because it's a high, so people tend to duck a lot against Steve whilst he is in Peekaboo. So it's a high homing move as well. That's a counter hit launcher and a counter parry against jabs. Yeah. It is very strong, guys. Like, don't sleep on Steve's Peekaboo 2. It is very, very strong, and this is why his pressure in Peekaboo is very, very dude. So it's pretty good. So you can do stuff like down 1 into down 1, Peekaboo down 1 into Peekaboo 2 is a good frame trap, right? It will parry the jabs, it will counter hit anything that's slower than jabs, right? So even a down forward 1, it will counter that. So usually the counter play against Steve in this stance is sidestep duck, right? Because Steve's, like I said, love is in either down 1 or Peekaboo down forward 2. You do have some mids from this down forward 1. You have down forward 1 strings, you have down forward 2, which is a natural launcher on normal hit. You have Peekaboo up forward 2 as well, the Shoryuken, which is also a natural launcher, although it is launch punishable. But sidestep right duck usually beats all these options, so you must be very, very careful. Just don't want to spam Peekaboo down 1 and Peekaboo 2. Now the thing you can do to counter this is actually duck cancel into Peekaboo again. So you can do like Peekaboo down 1, right, then forward 3. You can cancel into his duck, right? Remember, guys, his duck, very, very useful. So Peekaboo down 1 into duck, so forward 3, then cancel with down back, then do full crouch down forward 1 again to go back into Peekaboo using the low. So this like messes up their timing. It realizes yourself with the opponent, so they can't just step and duck because they will get hit by this as well. So yeah, this is why I say this stance, you can stay in this stance for as long as you like, as long as you have good reads against your opponent and you have the timing right. So like down 1 into cancel, duck into cancel to down one again. This will keep you in your opponent's face as well. Another good counter to this Steve pressure is the Korean backdash. You create some space between you and Steve whilst he is in Peekaboo. So this duck cancel is a good way to cover space, right? You can either do forward 3 cancel into full crouch down forward 1 to get back in your opponent's face, or you can do albatross. So 3 plus 4, you just spin and go back in your opponent's face. So that's pretty good. So good setups. Again, like I said, this Peekaboo jab into Peekaboo 2. This will counter anything they throw. If they throw jabs, they'll get parried. If they throw down forward 1, they'll get counter hit. You know, Peekaboo 1 2 is 0 on block. So Peekaboo 1 2 into Peekaboo 2. So you mix this up by throwing mids afterwards. So Peekaboo 1 into Peekaboo down forward 1, or Peekaboo 1 into Peekaboo up forward 2. Risky. Peekaboo 1 into Peekaboo down forward 2, Peekaboo 1 into Peekaboo forward 2. Peekaboo forward 2 actually goes under highs, guys. It goes under jab, so it's a very strong tool to use as well. You don't really want to do the full string for Peekaboo forward 2 1 because it can be interrupted midway through. You do have other options such as jab, the grab to throw the timing off, so you can do like Peekaboo down 1 into grab as well. Comes out really fast, but it is only throw from the stance, so it's not really a mix-up. I apologize for my dog, guys. My dog is going crazy. Anyway, never mind. So again, Peekaboo is just his pressure stance. Like, you want to be aggressive with Steve and stay in your opponent's face, then Peekaboo is just that stance for you. Again, this goes back to the creative mind of the Steve player. There's so much you can do off of this. You can go from Peekaboo, you cancel into flicker. You know, you can go like Peekaboo albatross to down low, to down 2. Like, there's so much you can do with Peekaboo. There's so much you can do with Steve. There's so much you can do with the cancels. This is one of the reasons I really love this character, because dude, not many Steve players play the same way, right? It's just very creative in the mind of the Steve player. So again, Peekaboo is a very strong stance that allows you to stay aggressive. If you want to be the pressure god, like a pressure Steve player focused mainly on pressure, then I suggest you prioritize using Peekaboo. It is a very safe stance, not that risky, unless your opponent has like super hard reads on you. So throughout this video, I've spoken a lot about Steve's duck cancel, so forward 3 into down back, and it deserves its own section because on its own, it's a pretty good tool to just get in your opponent, and it's very good in certain matchups as well. So it deserves its own section, and you should really be using this forward 3 as well in your Steve gameplay. So firstly, what makes it so good is, like, think of it like Steve's wave dash, right? The only difference is Steve is in a crouching position for like, you know, 80% of his body, right? You rarely get hit by highs when you're in this state, and even if you get hit by a high, if you cancel at the right time, mostly you will block most of the high, so it makes it very good to just get in. So the most basic example is, like, for example, in the Peekaboo section, we spoke about how you can use forward 3 cancel into full crouch down forward 1 as a way of getting in, going back into Peekaboo. So you can still do that even just in a neutral. That doesn't basically have to be always out of Peekaboo, just as a way to get in your opponent. You can mix that up with rocket launcher. So if you guys didn't know, you can actually do rocket launcher from full crouch. You can do like forward 3 into duck cancel into rocket launcher. You mix that up with his full crouch down forward 1 low, which takes him into Peekaboo. So already you have mind games from his like wave dash, right, or his duck dash, or whatever you'd like to call it, which makes it a very good tool, like I said, for just getting in. Secondly, like I said, it's very good in certain matchups, mostly against the Mishimas, because the Mishimas love spamming electrics. And remember, electrics are highs. They are high. So like I said, their state is basically Steve in a crouching state, so the electrics will go right above his duck cancel, and if he gets hit, most of the times, if you cancel correctly, you will still block this electric, as you can see from this demonstration here. It's a very strong tool to just get in without very little risk. Now again, it depends on the matchups. You don't want to do this against characters like Jack or characters like Leo, because those characters have down forward tools that will launch crouching opponents as well. But against characters that have down forward tools that don't launch crouchers, like Hwarang, like Low, like Po, this entry or this duck cancel is actually another way to just get in on the opponent, right? It's either they just, you know, clip you out of the crouch dash without very little risk, or you just safely get in for free. But in some instances, if the timing is wrong, you will get clipped by that down forward 2, especially if you press something like, instead of standing 1 by mistake or something like that. This used to be good in Tekken 7 because he did have outstanding 2 from crouch, which was a counter hit launcher, but that was nerfed now, so you won't really find many pro players using this that much. But against characters like Mishimas and characters with crouching down forward 2 launchers, guys, use this as a way of just getting in. It's very, very underrated. I don't understand why most players don't use this. It can trivialize the Mishima matchup. Honestly, it gets annoying for them, it gets frustrating. It's a very, very strong tool. So Steve's up back 3, his manual entry into LionHeart is such an amazing tool to create whiff opportunities for yourself. So think of it like a makeshift Feng Wei back Kempo. You can create space instantly and gain access to his fastest quick launcher, which is his LionHeart. So his LionHeart 2, which is an instant screw or natural hit. Steve does not have access to a lot of whiff punishers that launch your opponent, so up back 3 gives you access to his LionHeart 2, which is his fastest launcher from the stance, instant screw on natural hit. So just like Feng Wei, you use this as a back Kempo just to create space. You can cancel the back Kempo or the up back 3 by doing his forward 3, cancels forward 3 into down back to make it safe, or you can sway left or right as well to cancel the LionHeart stance. Now this is not just good to create with opportunities, it's good to get you out in situations that otherwise can force you to eat guaranteed frame traps or guaranteed frame mix-ups. For example, we spoke about Steve frame traps such as 1-1-2 into back 1 or like 1-1-2 into down forward 2 to mix up the opponent. Well, if you're using Steve against Steve, you can instantly do like an up back 3 to get out of range and create a punish for yourself due to this like back Kempo instant move that creates space. Like, it's just so good for that matter, right? And you can also have access to LionHeart 1, which is a safer option if you don't want to go for LionHeart 2, because sometimes you can throw out the LionHeart 2 a little bit late, right? And the opponent blocks and punishes you, although it's only -13, so not that risky. So instead you can throw out LionHeart 1, which is a safe homing move that takes you into hit. Like, honestly guys, this should always be used in your game plan as well, right? Because Steve, like I said, is a very compact character that relies on counter hit, good jabs for keep out. So if you add evasiveness to all that, he becomes very difficult to just get in onto, right? Like, it's not that easy to just get in on Steve for free. It's just so hard, and this is because of this freaking up back 3 as well. It's so good, very, very underused in my opinion. This is especially good against certain matchups. For example, I like it against Dragonov, bro. Like, this thing always makes down to whiff, right? Down to whiffs almost half the time I use up back 3. However, it's not as evasive as Feng's back Kempo, because Feng's back Kempo can like make running to whiff. Dragonov's running to can completely whiff off of using back Kempo, but Steve up back 3 doesn't have the same luxury. You can also create some good setups. For example, like we spoke about frame traps, like, you know, outstanding 1-2 into like back 1. So instead you can do like outstanding 1-2 into up back 3, right? They throw something, you whiff punish them with the LionHeart 2. You can create some setups like Albatross 2 into up back 3, create a whiff opportunity for yourself, then whiff punish them. It's just that flexible, honestly. There's not much any complicated way to use this move. You just have to be smart about it. Throw it out once in a while, remind them that you actually have that option. And lastly, I want to talk about Steve's hit, which gives him a huge power bump. Like, Steve goes from a counter hit fisher with pokes to a pseudo grappler that does so much damage from these two command grabs. Now keep in mind, I've done a separate hit guide on Steve. I'll leave the link in the description below, so please check it out. So I won't really cover everything on Steve's hit, but I'll cover the most important fundamentals. So firstly, both of his grabs give you 50 damage, and 50 damage throws in this game are rare to come by, right? Not many characters have 50 damage throws. I think only King right now has a 50 damage throw with his tombstone, but overall Steve gets 50 for both. So from his 1 you can go into Peekaboo to get an instant forward 1+2. Take some practice, right? But it's honestly not that difficult to do once you practice a lot, and his 2 throw does 50 damage raw. So Steve also gets access to an instant extended dark input. So down forward 3+4 gives you an instant extended dark input. It comes out so fast at the cost of some of your hit gauge. And the downside to this is that Steve's hit grabs take up so much of your hit gauge to the point that it's not really worth using this input command grab unless you are going like in a dire situation, you have your opponent red, you can go for the instant command, like the command input for his extended dark. duck. But ideally, I do advise you to go for the manual extended duck input. So basically, you hold forward 3 or hold forward 4 to go into extended duck, then go for the throws. This is because, like I said, the command input down for the plus 4 takes up some of your hit gauge, right? You lose so much hit from using this command input down for 3 plus 4 that you instead want to go for the manual input. And this is actually very, very strong because Steve does have some good mids from extended duck, so you can hold forward 3 to go for extended duck 2, which is a natural launcher on hit, although it's minus 14, or you can stay safe and go for extended duck 1, which gives you a knockdown for a guaranteed forward 2 that gives you 40 damage. Now, this is especially good because the grabs are highs, right? So use it kind of like a mix-up. This is what makes this hit mechanic so very, very scary, especially when used after Oki. So let's say you get a screw, right? Boom, you go for like back 1 2 into, you get a tornado spin that floats them in the air, but instead of going for the full combo, just go into extended duck as an Oki situation. They stay on the ground, you launch them with extended duck 2, they get up, you go for the ground throw. That's basically the principle behind Steve's Oki using his hit command grabs. Even at the wall, you can go for Shoryuken combos into extended duck Oki setups, right? Extended duck 2, you hit them on the ground, right? They get up on the ground, you grab them with an input command grab. This is a basic way to do Steve's Oki setups in his hit command grab. Now, like I said, please check out Steve's hit guide. I dive deeper into this. I don't want this guide to be so long, so I will end here for now. So there you have it, guys, a Steve guide focused around offense and defense, revolving around some of his most important tools in his arsenal. Now, I know I haven't covered so many other moves like Albatross 2, Corner Circle Forward 2, and that's solely because I didn't want the guide to be over 1 hour. It's just over 1 hour, sadly, but what can you do? This character is just so deep, it's just so in-depth. I had to cover as much as possible. So tell me how you feel about these long guides. Would you want them shorter? Do you like them longer? Do you want to see more? Let me know in the comment section below. And please keep in mind, I've done separate guides for an introduction guide, what Steve is all about. I've done a punishment guide if I don't know about Steve's punishment, and I've done a Steve hit mechanic guide as well. I'll leave the link to all these guides in the description, so please make sure to check them out. As usual, if you enjoyed my content, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment section. Help me help you improve my guide. So GG, my boys, and may the frame data be ever in your favor.